have the roll call. Amy?
Gabrielle Manis.
Here.
Jim McConnor.
Here.
Cindy Lawson.
Here.
Wade Clement.
Present.
Tammy Bach.
Here.
We have the minutes from February the 2nd, 2015. Any changes, modifications, additions?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion. I hear a second.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve the minutes of February the 2nd, 2015. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimous. Public comment. Anyone who would like to address the General Employees Pension Committee? I anticipate tomorrow we will have people sitting in those seats, so we might as well be prepared. This is a good practice to say public comment. Attorney's business. Discussion of the resolution, a resolution of the City of Vero Beach, Florida, amending the City of Vero Beach General Employees Retirement Plan, amending Article 1, definitions, amending Article 5, retirement benefits, amending Article 7, termination of employment, amending Article 8, total and permanent disability, creating a new Article 15, plan freeze of participation in defined contribution plan, and providing for conflict and severability, and providing for an effective date.
There is a late addition to the resolution. I changed a couple of things. First of all, was getting the council members' names correctly.
Always a good thing.
The other thing was I added a section dealing with the purchase of military service, and that's because the subsection 2.5D had in there that I think what we needed to do is change it to include the effective date, the June 30th, 2015 cutoff date, because it referred to the contribution rate at the time of purchase, and there isn't going to be a contribution rate at the time of purchase, so that didn't make any sense. The contribution rate will no longer exist as of effective June 30th, 2015. So that's the contribution rate that should be in place if you want to continue to permit the purchase of military service. And I don't know how many people that will be either. I mean, it's an expensive thing to do to purchase military service. So.
People do it though.
Do they?
Yeah, and also in that same section about the military service, that fixes that problem. The other question was it says must purchase the credit after he becomes vested, but in no event after 6 years of service. And so we're rolling with the idea that everyone becomes vested when the plan is frozen, and therefore that language works.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they're instantly vested, and it I think it says that in Article 15. So. I mean, it could be reiterated in there.
That takes care of that, though. No, that takes care of my question on that.
And we were talking about the cutoff point.
Before we leave that,
sure.
Credit for military, wonder if somebody has retired from one other entity, claimed military credit on that, came to work for us, and can they claim military credit again?
No.
Only one time?
Right.
Okay.
One of the things that I think we wanted to talk about, some of the things.
Wait. Where does it say that they can't do that?
Well, no, it's the IRS says they can't do that.
Okay, our plan doesn't.
Oh no, I don't think the plan doesn't say it. I mean, but you can't. You can only purchase service for one period under one plan.
When is that reported to the IRS?
Is it reported that they purchase it?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I was just saying.
I think it's the kind of thing that could be.
How do you know?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that could be found in an audit. I don't know if it's reported to them. I know you're not allowed to do it. It's basically equivalent of if a lot of plans you can purchase prior service as a firefighter. If you worked in another city in Florida, you can come in and say, well, I want to buy my service under that plan and you're already getting a benefit. I'm not sure what mechanism is in place that anybody'd see whether they were actually getting a benefit for that service, but it is illegal.
I'm thinking about somebody who retires from the military and then comes to work for you.
Right.
I mean, he's being paid for military service in that retirement, that he could not claim military service credits with us.
Typically, the people that purchase service are the ones that weren't there long enough to get a retirement benefit for that service. It's very short, 5 years total time that they can purchase.
5, 4 or something.
I think we have some people working for the organization, they're military retirees, don't we?
I think, but what I'm understanding you saying is if someone retired, did their 25 years in the military, they could still come here and purchase military service credits?
No, I don't think you
No,
could.
okay.
If you retired from the military, if you were if that was your career, that was your job, was the military, and you were being paid, and there was, and you earned for that credited service that in the military, you earned a retirement benefit. In my opinion, you could not purchase that service elsewhere because you're already receiving a benefit for that.
Yeah, because some people, 20 years, they're only 41 years of age.
Right.
And this is only up to 4 years anyway.
Is it 4 years? Yeah.
It's
Well,
4
I mean,
years.
5 years is the maximum. You can have under that. You can allow. You don't even have to allow the purchase of military service under your plan.
But this is for that individual who may have only done 5 or 6 years in the
Went in there,
military.
did their 2 years, and got out, and now they just want that service. They're not getting any benefit for it, so they're just purchasing it. And it is along the same lines as somebody that worked a couple of years for another fire department or police department. They could purchase service.
Okay. We can move on from there. You were on to another item.
Yeah, there are a couple things that while they're in the resolution, they're still up in the air as far as waiting for information from the actuary. One of those things that we need to discuss is the cutoff for a de minimis benefit. We currently have in here that if it's less than $10,000, the actuarial present value of someone's accrued benefit is $10,000 or less, that it's being paid in a lump sum. That is what's being proposed under the resolution.
You want to talk about what Rocky and I talked about? Or?
That would be good. I'd like to hear what Rocky had to say.
The first thing, and I just wanted Rocky to clarify this for me, because we've certainly gotten this question from a bunch of people, so when we clarify this tomorrow for the meeting, is that when we freeze this plan, everyone is vested on that date. And that there's an actuarially determined present value of their benefit, okay? That is what we're talking about here. It's not their contributions plus interest, although in some cases, as Rocky pointed out, the contributions plus interest might actually be more than the actuarially determined present value of their benefit for someone who's very young and who's been with us a very short time.
Possible.
In which case, they would get their contributions plus interest. They're going to get the greater of the two.
Right. Well, they have the choice. I mean,
Their
but
benefit
that's
will
true.
be
Their
the greater of the two.
Right.
Whatever. I mean, if the actuarially determined, according to Rocky, benefit is less than their contributions plus interest, then the amount they're going to have coming back to them is their contributions plus interest. They're not going to get. They're not going to get the worst of the two.
Right.
But
and I think that's what the language accomplishes, too.
Okay.
Pretty sure.
So he said that there's really two thresholds here that we're thinking about. One is under the IRS code, there's an amount that under which we can make cash outs mandatory. And is that the $10,000? Because he wasn't sure on public plans whether it's 10 or 5. Do you know? Or
I've
off the
used
top of your head?
10,000 in the past.
Okay.
Because 10,000, I think we've discussed in the past, that 10,000 is, in the grand scheme of things, a very small benefit. And if you look at what that benefit means, I mean, what he's saying is that the payments of this person's benefits for how their lifespan and their beneficiaries, the total amount of that in present value is only $10,000. So that's a very small amount for a monthly payment. And the administrative expenses would be more generally than the benefit.
Right. But according to Rocky, there's an amount that the IRS says we can make cash outs mandatory, and then there would potentially be another threshold at which we could say it's optional. So that we can't, and maybe he's saying the flip side, that we can't necessarily make those cash outs mandatory below the IRS threshold.
I'll have to look and see. I don't know what the mandatory cutoff is. I have used.
He remembers 5.
Okay. Well, I've always used 10.
Okay.
But that may be that. I mean, it's permissible, but maybe not mandatory. Is I think what.
And that's what he said. He goes. There's a threshold where we can tell people you don't have any choice. We're making you cash out, and that's an IRS threshold that he's not sure whether it's 5 or 10.
That's an easy thing to find out.
So that one, it's not up to people. It's just we're cashing you out if your actuarially accrued present benefit's less than that. But that there's another, and this is what he's going to look at, there's another possible group of people that it might be worth our while to cash them out because the benefit's so small that down the road it means writing them a check for $10 a month, and it's just more trouble administratively to keep them in the plan. And those people you would encourage to cash out by giving them the option, and they could have that check. Just a check with taxes taken out of it. Here you go. Here's some money, or it could be rolled over into an IRA or some other
a one-time lump
tax
sum
exempt plan.
rollover. You're
Right, but you give them the choice.
That's
so
ideal.
you might have people who are like, just give me my cash and I'm out of here. You know?
I would think almost 100. I'd be surprised if it wasn't 100%. I really don't think anybody thinks it's worth it to get a check for $10 a month for the rest of their life. I mean, like you said, it's not worth.
I agree. I would like to encourage them, though, to put it right into the ICMA where no taxes and all that other stuff.
The problem is, if they're allowed to have their money out, they're allowed to choose.
Yeah. But
Whether
I mean,
they
I
want
think we
to
need
check or
to
whether
be
they want to
able
roll
to
over.
tell them if there's what the benefit would be to roll
Well, no
over.
taxes is the
Yeah.
benefit.
Yeah.
I mean, they're either going to get a check minus all the taxes that have to be withheld, or they're going to get the whole amount rolled over into a
Which the
4%.
check could be relatively small.
Depending on if it's the 10,000 minus taxes, it's a pretty small check as opposed to getting the whole 10 rolled over. So the problem is Rocky hasn't had a chance to go through the demographic data to figure out what that second threshold is. Obviously, whatever the IRS threshold is, let's do that.
And I
Where
think
you're out.
I think it may have been 5,000, but they increased it to 10,000.
He's not sure because he says
but-
he thinks it's 5 on
Right.
private plans, but he's not sure what the public plan threshold
Right.
is. And that you might know.
For some reason, the 10,000 sticks in my head as the number. I mean, I know it's the number I've always used.
Okay.
And it may be one of those things that just changed. There have been so many overhauls over the last 10 or 12 years.
So we just need to be able to say definitively under X thousand, whatever that number is, because it's okay with the IRS, we're going to make your cash out mandatory.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to look up the IRS rule, and whatever the IRS rule is for mandatory, that's what number we'll put in there.
And then Rocky is going to look on the impact statement at the demographic data to see what other group of people there are we might want to encourage,
Right.
like where that sweet spot is. If once you get rid of all the under whatever 10,000, let's say it's 10,000. Once you get rid of all the under 10,000s, is there really that many more people that have very, very small monthly benefits that it's worth worrying about or not? Or can you just get rid of all the under 10s and get on with your
No, I think that'd be the ideal. I mean, the best thing to do, and I think it's best for them too, is especially if they can roll it over immediately into the ICMA and already starting ahead of the game. I think that's, if they're early in their career, by the time they retire, that $10,000 is actually going to be providing a significant benefit for them.
But on the flip side, if you're talking about 20-somethings and they got a chance between $10,000 rolled into a 457 and a check for $7,000, they go buy a boat.
That's
you
exactly
and I both know what they do.
And that's one of the things you look at.
As far as they're concerned.
That's one of the things you look at, but then again, you can only advise people so far.
Exactly. I don't think we can make them do their
You can
smart
advise
thing.
them what maybe the best thing to do is, but we'll leave it up to them.
So that's been a huge concern on people's part is, what's going to happen to them. So I think the first thing for everybody to understand that they're automatically vested, that they're entitled not just to their contributions plus interest, but to an actual actuarially determined benefit, and that whatever the threshold is, they're either going to be able to roll it out into another qualified plan or stay in the city's plan and get that benefit when they get older. I think that'll alleviate some concerns.
Well, I agree. And also that they get the greater of the number, whether it's their contributions plus interest or the actuarial value of the plan.
Of their plan.
And I think that'll be a positive as well.
Because the present value of the stream for somebody who's 20 and has worked here, for 6 months is not much.
No. So Rocky's going to be able to give us a picture of that. The question comes up as to the employees. We'll be able to tell them what their actuarial value of their plan is.
Rocky is going to do two things. One, in order for this ordinance to be passed, he has to do an impact statement. And then two, he will, once we know the date of the freeze, you know how you get a thing every year that says this is your benefit? Yeah. Well, he'll do one of those based on the date of the freeze. This is your benefit at the end. It's the last one he's ever going to have to do, essentially, until you retire.
Okay, now this is a resolution and not an ordinance,
That's correct. I think that's what we talked about, right?
And it still takes 2 readings.
Okay.
It still takes 2 readings? Okay.
Because this was adopted by ordinance.
Right. Ordinance?
Resolution,
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
right,
the
right,
original plan was adopted by resolution.
Right.
So.
And was I understanding, not meaning to jump around, that there isn't a resolution required for the adoption of the ICMA, that they sent a service agreement? Is that?
No, there has to be a resolution that puts doesn't there have to be a resolution that puts that service agreement into our?
That was my understanding, but
Yeah.
originally that.
But you know what?
I know
Have we
it's down
done
the road.
that back when we were talking about ICMA and recommending it to the council? Did we pass?
I don't.
No, the resolution for the DC plan was part of this initial agenda. plan.
But this is not a DC plan committee, so we took it off so we can talk about it.
Okay, I just wanted to. Okay.
So
We still need to do that, we'll just do it at a later date.
yeah. Although we do already have a standing, but the contract with ICMA now, we have no matching contribution from the city.
It's not the same kind of contract. There's different IRS tax provisions and stuff on a 401A than there is on the 457. It's a different,
Right.
it's a different animal altogether.
Are there any other questions on the resolution?
And like I said, the resolution is, what I've done a lot of these resolutions and done a lot of plan freezes and closes, and the resolution is going to go through a lot of changes depending on what the actuary says. I think the final version of it, there'll be technical changes to it based on what we hear from the actuary.
What date will this resolution actually go in front of council in its final form? It'll have to be prior to June 30, right? Okay, so
Probably
sometime in May,
With a little breathing room. Maybe the second meeting in May?
but it's got two readings, so
Second meeting in May, first meeting in June?
then we should have it down to the fine print, right? Glenn, is that what you're thinking as well?
Yeah, I would think by April, certainly.
Okay. Whenever we get, I guess, to the final print, and that'll be Rocky's information.
Well, with Rocky, we sort of have to go the other direction too. We need to give him a deadline for this, for completing the impact statement. I mean, he knows that's kind of our broad goal, but if we know that it's going on the second meeting in May, then we can back that up by a week and back that up by a week and tell him that's the deadline for having it done. I mean, that's going to be better for us than just, hey, we're looking for May.
He's working on it now.
Yes, he started. He's working on it, but he needs a little more information himself. So, sort of an iterative process too. He needs to see this now that we've clarified a couple of other things, and then
Right.
kind of go back and forth with you.
Or since you are in contact with Rocky, can you tell him it's going to go on no later than the second meeting in May in order to meet our June?
First reading, second meeting in May. Okay, I can back that up to when we need it from him to get it
Yeah.
with that package. Now, we also, just so you know, we have a meeting of this board on May the 6th, and one of the things that I had anticipated Rocky doing was discussing that impact statement with this board on May the 6th. So that timing is good. That still gets us to the second meeting in May
Yeah.
for council, but so that we can all be clear on what that impact statement says before it goes in front of council.
Okay, now, do you anticipate him having his final work product that May the 6th?
For May the 6th, that's the plan.
Okay. So there was already a date set in motion.
There kind of was, yeah. I just didn't know. I had heard some thoughts about trying to get this done in April, and that's what I was trying to find out, was whether we thought this was really going to happen in April.
Well,
whether
to
May
be very
6th
honest
works
with
for
you, it would be nice to have it done in April. We're just dragging out the pain and agony as far as I'm concerned, but we have to work within other people's timeframes.
Exactly. So, okay. So May
I
the
did have
6th
another.
works.
I'm sorry. I did have another question on disability, just to, and it might be something that. On my disability provision in here, the way it currently reads when they're determining the amount of a disability, it's calculated on their disability is calculated on the date of termination of employment is the way it reads now. The date that their employment is terminated due to disability. We've changed it to say that it's calculated as of June 30th, or the last date of disability, whichever comes first. That's just to cover whatever, I don't know.
Now, you have in here June 30, 2013.
Yeah, 2013. This should be 15. That's probably when I first wrote this provision.
Probably.
But that's something that that you may want to talk about, and that may be a city decision as to how they want to do that. It could be calculated as of their date of termination of employment. given that there's fewer people that get a disability payment, like when you're calculating normal and early retirement, you know those people are going to get a benefit. There's 100% certainty, whereas there's a smaller certainty that they're going to get that require a disability. And obviously this would be a significantly reduced disability if you're using their, if somebody gets disabled 10 years from now, obviously their salary is going to be a lot different than it is on June 30th, 2013. So that's something that's a city policy decision. That is up to the city how they want to do that, calculate disability.
But your retirement's going to be calculated as your salary as of now.
No,
so
that's
why would
true.
your disability grow? You'd be better off. We'll have people jumping off buildings.
That's true.
Your retirement benefit gets bigger if you go up on disability.
I actually hadn't thought of that, but
I think
Notice
we need to be prepared to make the recommendation to the city council.
Right.
So
it is a policy matter. That's the only reason I bring it up. This isn't a requirement. This isn't. Normal and early retirement. Everybody is going to go on normal and early retirement. That's 100%. They're all going to get a benefit of some sort, either them or their beneficiary. So that's why those are figured on a certain date, because it would be too expensive to do it otherwise. Disability, it may be. I don't know what the rate of disability is, but it's just one of those things that is determined by the plan sponsor. And it could be just left as it is with that one change to 2015.
are there any comments from the members?
Yeah, I was going to ask Lynn if he would explain something. I've just had a lot of questions.
Tammy, before we get off of that, on the disability, I guess the bottom line is I'm looking for us to take a direction out of here. Do we like how it's worded here?
I think it makes sense in the context of the other changes.
Yeah, it does. It's that, and that's what the thinking was. They
Okay,
kept
so
it all
we're going to leave
uniform.
that as is. Then
Okay.
that's a consensus of the group. Tammy, you had?
Yeah, it's for Article 15.1. Can you just explain that last paragraph, Lynn, having to do with the accrued vacation and sick time?
That's exactly where I was going.
Okay.
15.1.
The last part of it.
Last sentence.
So the last. Oh, this.
Here's the bigger.
okay, I see.
Here's the bigger question in a nutshell. Maybe this will comport with what Tammy wants to know. Your retirement benefits are affected by how much unused sick and vacation leave you have on the books, just in the normal course of events. Are we saying that freezes on June the 30th, 2015 as well?
It actually freezes on the date of the contract, according to Florida law. The law changed back in 2000. It was either 2010 or 2011, and it said as of July 1st, 2011. No leave accrued after that point, any kind of leave, can be used in calculating a retirement benefit. Now, what they said was if you've already accrued leave up to that point, that can be used. But from that point on, you can't use it. The one exception to that is if you had a collective bargaining agreement in place. It had to be the next collective bargaining agreement passed after July 1st, 2011. Now, yours was kind of hung up, your bargaining. So this is actually the first collective bargaining agreement reached after that date. And so according to the statute, it's the date of the contract. The date that the contract ratified is there's several different interpretations of division of retirement is allowing, and that's one of them. And in this case, that just so happens to be the one that would make the most sense because of the circumstances.
And the only thing that's affected by your unused sick leave is your time in service, right? Essentially, you add to you add to credited service based on unused sick leave.
Right.
And so what you're saying is whatever the sick leave balance was as of October the 1st of
2011.
July 1st.
July 1st, 2011.
Or after our.
Or the contract date.
Forget the state law. What's our contract date then technically?
Yeah,
October 1st what?
I would think it was the date it's ratified rather than the date, because it's going to go back 2 or 3 years, won't it? You could do it that way. That's one interpretation.
Yeah, ratified by who? The
But
council?
everybody. Once the contract is.
We'll never have a contract ratified by both parties.
Well, you're going to impose it. I think it would be the date of imposition.
At the imposition,
Right.
okay. So it'd be whatever that date was.
So they had their ratification vote. It went no. It goes So it goes into effect. I mean,
So whatever unused sick leave balance people had, everybody, because remember, there's people affected by this pension plan. They're not part of the bargaining unit, so the contract's meaningless to them.
right. Well, yeah, and that's true, but it's still going to.
Okay.
It's still going to be the same.
So we can apply that same date to those
Yeah,
people
you
too.
can.
So I need a date on date X. That's the date on which whatever unused sick leave balance you had on that date is all the sick leave that we're ever going to use to credit towards your credited
Right.
service. Okay. I mean, because that needs to be really clear to people. There's a lot of confusion about sick leave
Yeah, but-
anyway
and
because
again-
of this freeze and this and the other thing. And correct me if I'm wrong, this freeze in a bank and putting it over here, again, has nothing at this point to do with this calculation of credited service.
Right. And this credited service has nothing to do with the plan freeze. This had to happen anyway. This change had to be made. It's required by Florida law.
We did this with the police.
Yeah, and the actuary would be doing it that way anyway. Even if it wasn't in the plan, he wouldn't allow it to happen. It would be automatic for him. You couldn't do it.
Okay.
It's Florida. It's under Chapter 112. It governs actuaries, is what it does.
And your unused vacation leave has nothing to do with your
it's-
retirement benefit.
Right. It's only sick
purely
leave in your
sick leave.
case. It's
Okay.
only-
And so
As long
Rocky
as we're
must
clear.
have those dates because he's been giving us analysis. He doesn't have.
I would assume he has a lot of Florida plans, and they're all very. I mean, they're this.
But as you point out, it didn't matter because we had a collective bargaining agreement up until
you did.
now.
It didn't matter for you guys. It
Exactly.
only
So
matters
Rocky's
as of
never
that
done
date.
one on this basis. What I'm saying is this is new and would have happened anyway. But as of the date of the imposition of this contract, that's the date on
But it's
which
not
Rocky
this-
can't calculate
It's
anymore.
not this. We ratified one last year that would have been after 2011
You ratified a
contract.
and
with
it
the-
dealt with pension.
No.
The
No, it
pension
did
was
not.
status quo.
I guess I'm confused as to how. I mean, it didn't deal with. It didn't change pension, but it didn't.
Did not change pensions.
So, I mean, that
Left it in
would
place.
still be. It would still cover pension, even if it didn't
Still
change. it.
covered pension.
Well, then I think that would have been the date. If you ratified a contract, that contract would have been the last contract ratified after July 1st, 2011. That would have been the cutoff date then.
Even if the pension, even if it didn't address that.
Well,
particular
it actually
element.
did govern pension.
Pension.
It just left it as a status
Okay,
quo.
so as long as the pension was in place.
I mean, it was
the
in
new
there.
laws-
If you look in there, there'll be an article retirement, and so it covered it.
So I guess what we need to do is go back as to when the next contract was put into place after 2011 by the city council. Because I don't think we've had a union vote positive on a contract. It hadn't been one since I've been here.
No, I would say we'd have to use the date within which they voted on those 6 articles that were imposed
And they did that the year
Correct.
before this.
for this.
Well, I mean, it's the date the contract was and ratified. Can be, when I say that, I just mean the date it was imposed. Now, you're saying that there was a contract that was ratified. Is that not? Am I misunderstanding?
They voted it down.
The unions voted.
I mean, a year ago, you said
a year ago we imposed a contract.
the
With the
entire
same-
contract for
yes.
a 1 year. So that
Yeah.
was the first new contract, in my opinion, since July 1st.
Did we do a year before that?
That one I'm not sure on.
I guess we'll need to go back and check.
See, now I was under the impression that it was a multi-year contract, and it just has been just delayed.
It started
is
out
what happened.
multi-year, but we could never come to agreement.
Right. Okay.
So you have to impose it if you don't come to an agreement. This is my understanding. Is that right?
Right.
I mean,
You
and-
can.
and-
You don't have to. You can though.
Yeah, and that's what the council, because last year, the council voted on the contract, the union voted it down. It had the pension, but the council did not impose anything. Now, this would have been 2013.
Well, I mean, they still imposed the whole contract.
They did, yes.
That's. I mean, even if only certain articles were in. I mean, they couldn't agree on a couple of articles. Even if it was
Right.
2 articles, they were to impasse on. They still imposed the whole contract.
Correct.
For 1 year.
And then the union voted it down.
Right.
With theoretically left the pension plan in place as it was.
And then the contract
so
went into
this-
effect by law.
By law.
Yeah.
That the council imposed. And so this year, the council specifically addressed pensions.
Well, I mean, that's because, I mean, I don't know, maybe last time pensions were not one of the articles that impassed.
Well, we had agreed to it, the unions in the city, and so we let it slip and we got the shaft because the theory is that it was both parties agreed, but then when they voted it down, then it was not imposed because they voted it down.
I
Pulled
see.
the old switcheroony on us. Yeah,
They do that.
Yeah, they did that pretty well last year. So back to this then. So are we honing in on the idea that that sick leave, for the purposes of applying towards credited service, is frozen as of the date that this one was imposed? Is that what we're back to?
I think we're imposed, yes.
Because I'll tell you, this is not something Rocky will just do, and this is not something that 20 years from now anyone's going to know how much sick leave Joe Schmo accrued to this particular date. We have to freeze this and give this data to
What
Rocky.
we have to do is go back and find a contract. When was the last contract after 2011 that was put into place for the 12-month period?
I may actually have a report of that type, Cindy, because Lynn and I were going through this,
But what date?
and we froze, we had a date in mind, and we got a report from accounting of everybody's sick leaves as of that date. And we started going down this path with the pensions, and we were told that it wasn't until the contract ended, because it was either July 1st or after the contract ended, so we stopped. We didn't realize that because the contract was
Imposed.
that we should have still been doing it.
So basically, we need an attorney to tell us what the date is.
And I
You
could
or
do that. I mean,
Jason, or
and
you
it could
and
also.
Jason.
I think it also your labor attorney can tell you what that date is
And
too.
that may well
Yeah.
be the
He will be able to tell you the exact date that contract was effective.
That's it. And I think we'll have to rely on Jason as to when that.
Right.
So that
I mean,
we can.
he might know the date, whether it's the effective date of the contract, which would be, I could probably October 1st,
They are.
or the date it was imposed.
Typically, we impose it on the October the 1st.
Right.
Because if it was last October 1st, people have retired in the last few weeks that got credit for sick leave that they earned since then. That's what I'm telling you. The sooner we get a date, the sooner we can pull that report and provide it to Rocky so that he knows that the credited service never includes anything more.
And yours is it's an automatic, isn't it? If it's over that
Well, here's
120 hours, it just automatically goes towards credited services.
Sort of, because I'm going to ask the next question that I've asked that I've never had a good answer to. There's nothing in this pension plan that says credited service for the pension is increased by unused sick leave. And there's nothing in this pension plan as written that points back to the personnel policies and procedures that does govern what credited service is increased by for the purposes of the multiplier for retiree health insurance. I can't find anything in the pension plan that says pension credited services increased by unused
But
sick
it's been
leave.
doing it. It's been
the practice.
It's been the practice.
In accordance with the personnel policies
Right.
and procedures.
And I
maybe
think
that's what we need to point.
Yeah,
point
and
back
it
to.
should be in there definitely. I mean,
Okay.
and I think we discussed this once before. But the other problem was you almost had a labor problem where you couldn't stop doing it even though it wasn't in here because it's an established practice.
So basically, our established practice is to do it in accordance with the way we establish years of service in the personnel policies and procedures. But as of a date certain frozen, because that's going to change going forward. So
Right.
we can't keep tied to that because that's going to be different for retiree health care down the road. So we can't stay tied to that.
Right.
So when we freeze, we need to freeze that data too and just freeze and be done and give that to Rocky and say that's it. That's
Nobody gets any more after that day.
any more after that.
Yeah, that's the best thing to do.
Okay.
And then, Glenn, will we just impose that for the people who are not in the bargaining unit?
It'll be the same for everybody.
It's the
I mean, they're
same
not going to be able
date?
to do it anyway. So
Just
it's
use the same date for everybody.
But the longer we take to figure out that date, the more people slip under getting it done differently.
right. And I think if you told Rocky the date, he'd get it. I mean, I think he knows that Chapter 112 prohibits the use
Oh,
of
he'd
it.
be fine with that, but he doesn't
Yeah.
have the data. It's
Right.
us that provide him the data.
And he might have been going under
Accredited
the same
service.
impression that I was, that it hadn't gotten to that point yet, which was what I was thinking, that the contract had not been imposed yet, that it's just been negotiations had just been going on for years, because I've been in that situation many times where it's still status quo. You're still, whatever the contract was, you're still going to stay in as you go year to year. It's the same contract, status quo. It keeps rolling over. You can eventually go back and,
I think the council's taken action twice since I've been here,
okay.
So,
this year and last year.
so basically, what the last part of this paragraph is trying to say is exactly what we just said. That as of that date certain, and we need to fill in that date, as of the contract date, you're not going to get credit for any more unused leave toward your years of service. That's essentially what your last two sentences say.
Right, and I'm looking at the last. You all do it a little differently, where it's not a matter of them taking. You're not. It's not. A lot of plans you permit somebody to take their accrued leave and convert it to credited service. or they get paid. A lot of times they get paid that leave and it gets added to their salary for purposes of their pension, and so it kind of stays on the books. This one is more geared towards the latter, where you're using it to increase your salary and you keep it on the books, and then you use it at some point in the future. What this last sentence is meant to address, I'm not even sure would be applicable here, because this is meant to address a situation where somebody has, let's say, 100 hours, and then that's their frozen amount. When they get paid that someday, when they leave, that's going to be added to their salary.
We don't do that.
Right. And that's what that's meant to address. Whereas if they go down to 50 hours and then build it back up to 100, well, then it's meant they only get 50 because even though they're back up to 100, that other 50 was accrued later, and that's not the situation here. So this last paragraph,
2 sentences actually,
accurate, is really, it's not. The way you do it, it doesn't really.
Not applicable.
It's not applicable.
So really, those last 2 sentences really, though, should probably say, to resolve our problem about the fact that we're not directly tied in the resolution to the personnel policy, those last 2 sentences should be stricken in favor of a sentence that says, for the purposes of determining a participant's frozen accrued benefit in accordance with this subsection, credited years of service will not be increased by any sick accruals larger than those that the participant had on whatever that date is.
Right.
That's essentially
on
what
the
that last
contract
sentence
date.
means.
Right.
And address this issue we just talked about in one sentence instead of talking about the salary, which we don't do.
So credited years of service won't be increased for leave after the contract date.
For leave accrued after the contract date.
Right.
And that makes that clear. Okay, that makes sense, because this read, and I think I had the same confusion
Yeah, it
Tammy
was.
did. It read like things are going to go up and down, we're going to keep track, and that's not what we do. So, okay, perfect. That fixes that for me.
Tammy? Chip? So that was it?
That was it.
Gabriel? So we're going to change the last 2 sentences to 1 sentence, right? Is our
Right,
plan there?
right.
I did have a question. On 15.4, it talks about, in this resolution, it's talking about the defined contribution retirement plan. Do we want to do that in this resolution?
Well, I always have. You're basically saying what's going to. It has no legal effect on the defined benefit plan, but it says what is happening with everybody, where they're going. It might be the only place that says all employees will be going to the defined contribution plan.
Because the question I came to mind was, do we need to then address here vesting for current employees?
We did, under 15.1.
We did?
Accrued benefits, notwithstanding, participants shall be fully vested.
That's in the current plan. What about the new defined contribution?
You're
The new-
100% vested right at that.
The new defined contribution plan will define vesting and credited service and all the rest of it.
Yeah, the ICMA will.
The ICMA agreement.
It'll say that in that plan.
Right.
I think what Glenn is saying is this little sentence right here or this little paragraph here is the only place where those 2 things intersect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which I think it's a good idea to have it intersect, to show what we were doing, that we just didn't close out a pension plan for no purpose.
Right.
Anything else, Wayne?
No.
Do we need, this was just discussion item, when will we be voting on the resolution as the pension committee and recommending it to the city council? I presume that's the stage that it goes through?
May the 6th. Yeah.
We have a meeting in May, right?
Okay, so
Yeah.
so we should have the final document that we vote on at that point.
Which at that point should have the impact statement with it for the dollars and should have been a product of Glenn and Rocky talking about it too as they move through that process.
Okay. Any other discussion on the resolution?
I have none.
Okay, item 5, new business. Any new business to come forward?
I have one tiny piece real quickly. You know, we set this meeting up for tomorrow with, like, I think really good intentions of trying to alleviate people's concerns. But now I have a concern of my own that sort of falls in the no good deed goes unpunished category. That, you know, basically from what I'm hearing, how do I put this correctly? I'd like for it to be a useful dialogue, but I'm really not prepared for it to be the Spanish Inquisition or be, sort of adversarial when we're actually not the people that imposed the freeze. So I don't know if maybe, Mr. Chairman, you can preface this meeting with some calming remarks about how we're here to help, but we're not here to be berated, and see if we can keep the tone of this professional or not. We can try.
My plan was, as a matter of fact, I talked to one of the department directors today about that, who represents an awful lot of the employees. I think we have very anxious employees, and the only public forum to lash out is us. And yes, we will try to keep it professional, and I will start the meeting by saying that we are not the ones freezing it. This was a collective bargaining process, and what we have to do is adopt policies for this transition. But Cindy, to be honest with you, I don't anticipate that solving the issue.
No, I understand that. But I mean, I guess as long as we're all in agreement, there just, kind of reaches a point where we understand everyone's frustrated, but hopefully we can try to keep the tone where it needs to be.
And I agree. And we cannot respond to questions that don't apply to us. And I think as a commission or committee, we've got to make sure that we don't get into that type of dialogue. We've all experienced city council meetings when you try to answer that one question from the one person up at that microphone, and you spend all day and night not answering the question but debating. And we're not in the debate. We're here to say yes or no, or these are the answers to your question. And we try to keep it on that level.
Right. And along that same vein, one of the reasons that it stays a little better at city council meetings is because people at the podium address questions to various council meetings through the mayor. And I'm wondering if maybe it wouldn't be appropriate for the conduct of our meeting tomorrow for us not to all be blurting answers out to the people at the podium, but maybe for them to address their questions to the committee through you and have you sort of, control the flow a little bit so that it just doesn't turn into a giant, I don't know.
I don't know either. We'll have to sort of figure out what the forum's going to be and try to work with that. But yes, I do plan to address and make sure everybody understands we're here not to change any course. The only thing we're doing is a transition from one plan to another plan. And then try to answer their questions as to where their benefits are going to be frozen, and that Rocky, hopefully by May, will be able to get to each individual what their plan value is and the benefits. But everyone has received that information on an annual basis, right, Amy, that they should be able to go back last year and see what their benefit was, and it's increased.
They're always a year behind once the employees do get them, but they've gotten them every year.
Then the May number we have will be really a finite number. I mean, that we can count on that going forward.
Because nothing should happen that changes that for anybody except for early retirement.
All right. We will try to manage the meeting tomorrow as best we can. And
are we?
Do we need to go?
They did have. I mean,
Yeah,
they
we
did
need to
have
go
a
through
point
this.
when the issue was before the city council. I'm sure there was plenty of time for people to get up and give their 3 minutes of thought on adopting the plan freeze. The concept of it wasn't there.
It was a subject of collective bargaining, so they weren't allowed to, right?
no, they were allowed. I mean, it was a public meeting, and the union did have some folks that testified. But I'm just afraid that it's a little different this time. That was prior to their vote on the contract.
Right. Yeah.
Well, the resolution hearing with the council, there was nobody that spoke other than the two attorneys.
Well, you had Steve.
Yeah, just
Steve did most of the talking for the union, as did Jason for the city.
Yeah.
But perhaps, I don't know how. Just ask everybody if we could just maintain a civil environment or use civility in talking to each other.
Maybe start off by explaining the function of this committee. I mean, just the administrators of the current plan.
basically. Or not the administrators, but the guiding committee,
Yeah.
Just say it's my fault.
It's that guy down there.
I mean, because in reality, I think we're going to have to allow them to blow off some steam
I do too.
in that, but maybe we could just sort of couch it in, we may understand there's going to be a little bit of this, but we really are not whatever you tell us isn't going to be able to alter the course that we're on.
And I agree, and I think that's really the bottom line is there'll probably be some venting. I don't think we're going to get beyond that.
No.
And then so we just have to.
Can't, as
We
long
just
as
don't
you-
want to debate.
Or some kind of a big free for all. So there's a couple of things here in this memo, if we're going to give it out, that I think are different based on our conversation today. So I don't know if we're planning on giving this out to everyone, but if so, we might want to adjust those things to make sure it reflects what we just said.
For now, this is just for the committee. This is
Okay.
just so that everybody has a understanding of all the questions we've received.
Because some of these things aren't what we just talked about. So, starting at the top of page 2, this again includes the language about salary, including payments of accrued leave, which we don't do,
Right.
and doesn't include what we just talked about the credited service and the thing. And then this thing about the lump sum payout, where it says lump sum payment of the frozen benefit must occur after termination of employment. That's not necessarily true. If we determine that $10,000 or less is the threshold, they'll get the lump sum while they still work here.
Glenn, it may not be a bad idea if you did a lot of answering of the questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no,
Because I think that-
part of what I thought was going to happen was we discussed this memo.
Yeah.
In other words, this is for us, and then based on the conversations tomorrow, I complete a final memo which you distribute to the employees. I just thought because they might come up with questions we don't even have in here.
I'm sure they will, and that might be the best way to handle it is channel most of the questions through you. Then we are getting that third party input. Okay.
I've done this many times.
That way you don't have to sit across the table from them, as Amy and Gabrielle will probably have to do tomorrow or next day.
And the only reason I bring it up is because I will tell you my payroll staff has been taking a tremendous amount of abuse for the last couple of weeks over the sick and vacation leave freeze, and they're the very last people in the world that had anything to do with it. So I know the level of anxiety that's out there.
It applied to them.
It applied to them too, and I know the level of anxiety that's out there. So this is probably even bigger than that.
They needed to direct that at the legislature. That was passed 5 years ago.
No, I'm talking about something else that was done in the
oh,
contract
oh,
with
okay.
regard to sick and vacation
Okay.
leave. Oh no, it was another thing entirely.
We have a use it or lose it policy now. So
Okay.
Including on sick time, but we're not going to talk about that. What have you just incentivized with use it or lose it sick time? So do you want to go through this or a little bit?
If anybody had any other questions.
Other than that second
Yeah, I already
top of the
marked
second
those. I
page,
marked those down.
based on what we just talked about
Right.
about what Rocky said, and then down at the bottom of that second page, if we can figure out what that date is, that would be good. The furlough days thing is causing a lot of anxiety. I don't know if anyone else has had that question or seen this answer, but that's
Yeah, and I had a question. I had a question about that too. I didn't know whether the furlough, the actual furlough and the cut applied to the same group of people, or was it two different groups of people that got that it happened to in different ways?
everyone got furloughed.
Right.
And the furlough was not a pay cut. And so the January 1 salary that was reported to the actuary stayed the same. The furlough days were extra days off without
Right.
pay. But then after the furloughs went away and everyone else was restored to their normal work year, there was a group of people who made over $70,000 a year actually took a 4.62% pay cut. And in that following year, their actual January 1 salary as reported to the actuary went down. It was
Okay.
turned into a pay cut for a small
And
group
there's
of
not
people.
much you can do about that.
And there's not much we can do about that. So that, unfortunately, is within that 5 years.
Right.
So it brings the average down.
And that's, and when you look at what the savings from a pay cut, that's one of the things that makes it a savings. So,
Cindy, going back to that comment, so the people who were, for example, in the bargaining, or the people who were not salaried, it did not affect their.
Because a furlough day was an extra day off. It did not lower their salary. It lowered their pay by giving them extra days off. But within the payroll system, somebody's January 1st is the salary basis for the benefit calculation. The salary wasn't lowered. Your hourly rate stayed the same. You just worked fewer hours. That's what a furlough did. Okay. But then when we turned it into an actual pay cut for that group of people, that does affect the payment. Okay. But for everyone else, it's fine. Their hourly rate, their annual salary didn't go down. It's just they worked fewer days. They had more days without pay.
Or their annual salary in dollars actually did go down.
What they got paid went down, but their salary did not. And the salary is what they're...
It's not based on what you actually are paid?
No.
It's what was actually reported on the salary basis.
At January 1,
Okay.
what your salary was.
So that's why the furlough days would not be impacted, but the 4.65
became a real
decrease
pay
is
cut.
Reported and is a real pay cut.
Within our payroll system, you have a January 1 salary, be it an annual salary or an hourly rate, which is your annual salary.
So,
and you're getting this, nobody got a pay cut with furloughs, but then a group of people did actually get a pay cut. And those are the people that are going to be affected. You're thinking defined contribution plans. Now, with a defined contribution plan, the percentage multiplier is applied to the money you actually make.
Okay.
Because it's a percentage of your salary. But that DB doesn't work that way. So you've got a small group of people that are very unhappy because it did affect them because their furlough got translated into a pay cut. But the good news for most everyone else is that furlough didn't hurt them in terms of their 5-year average. Which is pretty much all the bargaining unit employees. They're all happy.
Yeah. Happy.
Relatively speaking.
It's a relative term.
On this particular issue, they're happier than the management people.
Management people, okay.
That's a more exact statement.
So in thinking back, we should have given furlough days to management people?
Management people got furlough days too.
No, I mean furlough days when that 4.62.
But that's not what we were told to do. We were told to cut everybody's salary. Remember, we said, can we just keep the furlough going? No. Remember, the difference was we came to work.
I was opposed to furlough.
Right. But what we were told to do, remember, furlough days would have meant that group of people would have gotten extra days off, like every Friday or every other Friday. And it was like, no, we want them to have less pay, but we want them here every day.
Okay, because the salary would have been, okay, I see, So there wasn't much in it,
Yeah.
Because they were salaried people,
It's like, no, we want them to take the pay cut and come into work every day, because that would be our cake and eating it too.
Okay, any other questions on the memo? And we're addressing this under new business, I
And then
believe.
your disability on the top
That's been
page there
resolved.
is exactly
Right.
like it's written in the thing. Okay, good. That's a big one, that early retirement thing. I'll tell you, that was the most amazing thing I heard from one person, that they were under the misperception that on the date of the freeze, it would be as though you retired on that day. And if you were less than 65, you would be hit automatically with the early retirement penalty. And I'm like, no.
Now, that might be the case if you had a termination of the plan and you were paying out all the benefits, which is what happens. You terminate the plan, it no longer exists. You give everybody a check or you roll it over or whatever they want to do. It's up to them. Now, they can roll it over and they don't have to worry about it, if that's the way it works, or they'll just, but either way, you're giving everybody checks. You're terminating it, you're closing it, you're getting rid of all the money, it no longer exists. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what they were thinking.
Right. Which is not possible when your plan's only 60% funded unless,
It is exceedingly difficult.
It's like a run on the bank. Don't be the last one there to cash your check.
Be among the first 60%.
Exactly.
Any other questions on the memorandum, which is going to be rewritten to reflect?
I have a couple of things on the list that we got from Monty that I don't see addressed in the memo.
Okay. I might have, there's a couple of things that I wrote and didn't put in the memo that they're more like, I thought were things we could just resolve right here.
Mm-hmm.
What were the ones you were thinking?
Once the current plan is frozen, can a future council change the formulas for the payout?
Yeah, and I didn't include that in the middle. It's possible. There's nothing that can prevent the council from increasing benefits once it's done. I've never heard of it happening.
Or decreasing.
Or decreasing. They can't decrease. You're vested in that benefit. It can never be decreased.
They could.
In the
that's
future.
right. They can't.
That's
See,
right,
because
yeah.
they can't do it going forward.
No,
because there is no forward.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking the only thing I was thinking only in terms of increasing, which is the only option, and I
don't think we have to worry about that.
They're
heard of
thinking in
that
terms of
happening.
decreasing,
No,
and you're right.
no
By
concerns there.
definition, it can't be decreased
Right.
because it's frozen.
Yeah, once you're vested in a benefit, that's it. It's solid. It's solidified. There's nothing that can happen. It still must be funded by law, and it still must be paid out in the amount that's determined at the time of the freeze. Those things cannot be altered ever.
I think you're right, though. The question was asked thinking that the council in the future could make it even less than it is.
Oh,
By
okay.
changing the multiplier, but they can only make those changes going forward, and there is no forward.
So basically what you're saying is the answer to that is, in essence, no, because
It
it
is no.
cannot be decreased.
Right. It
It
is
can
no.
only be increased.
It cannot be.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead
So
and
it's
bring up?
status quo.
Right.
Okay.
Why don't you go ahead and bring up that they can increase
Yeah.
it, and see what kind of laugh you get? That might lighten the crowd up.
Well, sometimes there's reasons I don't put things in memos.
Okay, Amy, what was another one?
If existing retirees are given a raise after the freeze date, does the frozen defined benefit increase for future retirees?
Well, I kind of included that in that it's determined on the date of the freeze, and it's never going to change. So that's no matter what happens. If you're given a raise in the future, anytime after that freeze date, it doesn't affect because you're on that freeze
frozen
date.
and
They're
That's your
talking-
benefit.
They're talking about the retiree COLA.
Oh, the COLA.
That's
Okay.
And the
That's
answer
why
is, once you
retirees-
become a retiree, you get the same COLA as everybody
It's
else.
written in the plan.
It's again, that's the benefit. The benefit is what the benefit is.
Exactly,
and
which
it
includes a
cannot-
COLA
it
once you're a
cannot change.
retiree, but
Right.
it doesn't. But your
Okay, I was
benefit-
thinking. I don't know why I was thinking employee raise, but yeah, it's the same thing. It is what it is on that date, and
but,
whatever the plan says.
But when you retire, you're now in the group of retirees. If the following year the retirees get a 1% COLA, you would get that same 1% COLA.
Once you're retired and
Once
receiving
you're
a
a
benefit,
retiree,
once
yeah.
you're actually receiving your benefit, and if retirees are entitled to a COLA, you get the COLA.
But you're not going to get COLAs to go on top of your accrued benefit every year if retirees do until you retire. That's what they're trying
No,
to say.
no, because they're not retired.
Exactly.
Just because your benefit has been frozen, it's very much equivalent to terminated vested. If I'm vested in a plan, I've got 6 years, let's say, and I'm vested, and I quit, and then I go on and I'm 20 years later I reach retirement age. I wasn't retired during that time. I was just terminated vested. Once I start getting a benefit, I am now retired. So it's true, yes, retirees, but they have to understand what the definition of a retiree is. It's somebody who's receiving a retirement benefit.
And being frozen is not like being retired. And I think that way you just explained it, that it's like being terminated vested,
Right.
is a great way to explain it to them. Because it's just the same as if you quit and went somewhere else. And then when you turned 65, you came back and said, okay, now I'm ready for my benefit.
Yeah, you call them up and say, I'm ready for my benefit. I want to start receiving my benefit. Okay.
The next one, number 6. I'm not sure how
Yeah.
I understand what they're asking.
Well, I did. They're asking
Can
if,
money in the defined benefit pension fund be moved?
and in the memo on the last page where it says the current trust, that's where I dealt with that. And there's something called the exclusive benefit rule under IRS, and what that means is all money is held in trust in your defined benefit plan. In order for a plan to be qualified, it must be used for the exclusive use of benefits, members and their member benefits and their beneficiaries. It can't be used for anything else. By law, that nothing in that money can never be moved.
So the answer is no, you can't roll your money out of it.
And I did put it in there. I just put it under a heading about the current trust. But that money can never be moved.
There's no there's no optional rollouts. The people that, let me make sure I hear what you're saying. The people that we decide are under the IRS threshold and we're rolling them out, that's all the rollouts. Other people can't electively roll their money out of our defined benefit.
Right, and that's not really the money being moved. That's being dispersed. I think there's a big difference between moving it. No, and when I said that, when I read this, I thought they meant, can the city move money out of there and use it for something else?
I took it as they're asking if they can make the choice to take their money out of the DB plan and invest it themselves.
Oh, okay, well, that depends on where they are. I mean, that's
still
answered in there. It just depends, is what it is. I mean, if you're in this situation, then yeah, it can be rolled over. If you're in this situation, no, you're going to get your benefit. I mean, that's the way it's answered, I guess. In that way, it's just not. It's just not specific to that question.
I would have taken it the same way. They're asking if they can all choose to roll their money.
Funny how I
out. The answer
read
is
these questions and I think of them in completely different terms.
The only other one was number 10. How will the benefit and frozen defined benefit plan be calculated for the spouse and or beneficiary of a deceased participant? I think I know the answer, but I just.
Yeah, I mean, whatever their benefit is on that freeze date, that's their benefit. That's their benefit, whether it's for them or their beneficiary. Of course, the beneficiary provisions are still in the plan. So,
Our normal annual benefit statements do not give the spousal survival benefit information.
And they won't.
And
No, I
they
don't think
still
it will
won't,
either.
but
Yeah.
that option is still there.
The real answer is no differently than it is right now, except for your benefit doesn't get bigger after the freeze date.
yeah, I mean, it shouldn't make a difference. Like I said, if you were terminated vested, it would be dealt with. Your beneficiaries would be dealt with in the same manner, and that's the way to look at it.
I know we covered that once before, but when do you decide if your beneficiary is going to benefit from your retirement, or is that automatic?
When you choose which option, which form of benefit you want to take. When you sign your notice of retirement, I send your information off to the actuary. He sends me back all the numbers. Here's if you take modified cash or 100% survivor. That's when they tell me which option they want.
Oh, okay, so they
Right.
have
It
to do that
reduced, it
at
reduced
retirement.
benefit.
But
Notice of retirement.
this is what we talked about. Let's all be clear. If someone passes away before they make that election and before they retire, it's not what we used to do where we force them to take a lump sum. The surviving spouse now has the option of taking the lump sum or taking
Right.
a form of
Which is
debt.
what we discussed the last.
Yeah.
That's
That's
what you're
what
That's
I
the change,
yeah.
yeah.
Anything else, Amy?
No, my only other question of the committee was how you're going to handle this tomorrow. Are we just going to wait for people to come up and ask the questions, or are we going to specifically address each of these because that's why they sent them in? I think if we just wait and take questions, we're going to miss some of these.
Oh, I
They
think
may
it would be
not
a good
get
idea
asked.
to answer them.
Yeah,
And then
through each and every
if you
one of
can, I mean, if it answers anybody's questions without them coming up, I think that
And
would be.
Glenn, that may be very good for you to read those answers, and then that way they know to direct questions down there.
Right.
That's a good plan.
Yeah, exactly. Just say, look, we gathered all your questions up on purpose so that we could have the answers prepared. Here's the answers to the ones we know about, and then afterwards we'll take any extra questions. That might diffuse a lot of people being up there talking.
Yeah.
And I was just going to defer to Wayne on everything.
We came, we saw, we deferred.
Let me look into that.
All right, we're still under new business. Anything else? Amy?
Nope.
Tammy? Okay, we'll move on to old business. Anything under old business? Next meeting dates, tomorrow at 4 o'clock, be there or be square. May the 8th at 2:30, the regular meeting. What do you need?
I had one more quick thing, but that's okay.
Well, go ahead.
I don't know, honestly don't know whether this is new business or old business. Amy and I have been kind of doing this since the last
Not setting
meeting.
up a meeting date, though, is it?
No, Amy, this is just maybe information for the committee. Amy and I have been doing this since the last meeting. At the meeting where Prudential came and gave us a briefing on our responsibilities as fiduciaries and internal controls, it occurred to me that for whatever reason, up to this point in time, in the last few years, we've been making disbursements from the fund and also signing retirement forms for Prudential, et cetera. Only one person has been signing them. And that's not good internal controls. We would never do that within the finance department. So we kind of took it on ourselves a few weeks ago that now when those retirement forms get filled out for Prudential, both Gabrielle and I sign them, so that there's two people looking at them, and we're going to take that approach with disbursements from the fund coming up here as well, just because that's really a better discharge of our responsibilities as fiduciaries. So I just want to make sure that's okay with the board.
Any concerns with other board members? having two signatures? Certainly hope not. What happens if either you or Gabrielle are not here to sign? Do you have signature?
Nothing's ever come up that's so crazy
Urgent that
it can't wait for us.
So we don't really have a signature cards per se. We do?
Actually do. It's Cindy, yourself, and Deborah.
And so you could substitute for one of
Okay.
us
Yeah, usually
if the worst came to it. Yeah. We have signature.
It's not that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that it just seemed like a good idea to put a check and balance on it. And
I
it's
agree
always a
with
good
that.
idea to have.
I agree. Any other items, issues? Do I hear a motion for adjournment? Did I hear from you, Tammy? Tammy says motion. Second?
I'll second.
And second by Cindy. All in favor? We are adjourned.